Looking to break into or advance your career in cybercrime and cybersecurity? Push your career forward with a master's degree in cybercrime and digital investigation from Michigan State University. Experience a nationally ranked program taught by world-renowned researchers and practitioners that can help you play a role in combating cybercrime and advancing justice for victims. Designed to be completed in as little as 2 years and in a flexible online format that can work around your schedule. Visit cj.msu.edu to learn more.
Welcome, everybody, to the Crossing the Firewall podcast. My name is Tom Holt. I'm a professor here in the School of Criminal Justice at Michigan State University. I'm also the director for the Center for Cybercrime Investigation and Training. And I'm here with my excellent co-host, as always.
Hi, I'm Rachel McNealey. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Criminal Justice and an associate with the center.
And we have a very interesting guest with us today who's going to give us some insights into areas that aren't necessarily studied much by Western scholars, which I think is going to be really helpful. We have Dr. Suleman Lazarus with us, who's a visiting fellow at the Mannheim Centre for Criminology at the London School of Economics. And it's great to have you on.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. So tell us, when did you get interested in studying cybercrime and topics related to cybercrime in general?
Yeah. I am from West Africa, and I have an elevated awareness of cybercrime, online fraud, even before I did my first degree. And just to give you the context, living in Europe, many people, when they hear you speak, and they kind of categorize you, oh, this is one of the scammers from West Africa, just because of your pronunciation of words or your perceived nationality and all that. And apart from that, when I was doing my undergrads and masters, I live in a neighborhood or shared flat where some of the mates, they were from all over the world, and some of them were actual scammers. So you could see the business going on, telephone call, or they cut printed papers, and instead of putting it in the general dustbin within the flat, they would go to a nearby stream and just sprinkle the papers there. So for me, as a coded individual with my own awareness, I knew that something was going on. But I wasn't studying them. But I knew all the signatures and scripts. So to put it in a small sentence, I am like that person that I draw the water from the well. So I could hear the frogs even before the hunters, the law enforcement, because I knew all the, nitty-gritty of online fraud and romance scam even before I started to study online fraud and all that. So it was one professor from London School of Economics, Professor Robert Reiner, one of the one-on-one conversation we were having. And he said, Suleman, you know all about all this computer crime. So why not, instead of the topic I proposed to do, why not you do something like that instead of maybe family studies, juvenile delinquency, and all these old school criminology theories that I wanted to hear. And so he said it, and I knew all that he was saying, but I did not kind of activate it in my mind to do something like that. It's like I have a stockpile of gunpowder, but he kind of scratched the match and, boom. So that was what happened, and I kind of changed my whole compass of doing a PhD from what I initially proposed to that direction, because I had access, I still have access. I knew I could go to people here and there in London and all over Europe without any prejudice. So that was, how I came into studying it academically.
So after you were pointed in that direction, then what was the first thing you started looking at with that?
Yeah, then I was completing my master's. So I wrote a proposal. He was one of the people that supported my references. Then I proposed to do ethnographic work, talking to criminals themselves, rather than just making assumptions, because much of the research, they talk about victim experiences, data from online, like online profile, dating apps and all that, without actually engaging one-on-one with active criminals to hear what they have to say. I'm not saying that that is only the only way to do it, but to hear their own ideology, worldview, motivations without, so that kind of image. So that was my initial engagement. I made my proposal and I got a scholarship for that. And yeah.
I think you've hit on a really important point. We often, just living in the US, often take for granted the idea of what offenses look like, what victimization looks like, but it is such a Western-centric focus that the cultural context, the specific regional context all matter. But as a person, if I'm just studying online forums, I'm not going to have that specific context. I'm not going to be able to understand the offense in depth. And as a consequence, I think work like yours is tremendously important. Can you talk at all about some of the challenges? Like, given you said that you were living with people who were arguably committing fraud, was it hard for you to access or talk about these issues with people who are actively engaged in it? Or was it easier because you have the connections with people based on coming from Africa?
Yeah. First of all, you have to build that type of trust, not just observing them from afar, as I was doing, maybe living in the same neighborhood or in the same flat, but actually engage with them and tell them, okay, I'm doing a research. They know that you study, or they know you're a college boy, you go, this kind, and they ridicule you. Oh, are you paying tax? You want to pay after your graduation, what are you going to earn? Maybe 50,000, 40,000. Oh, and you pay tax to the queen. Why not you do something worthwhile in your life? You just all the time in the library. So they see you as that kind of person. So once they do not see any danger coming from you, that you're going to report them, but they do not take anything for granted. Sometimes they will place on script and said, we have some victims coming from Scotland or Norway or Australia, and we're going to have the gig in somebody's flat or in this hotel, room, and they will tell you the specifics. But all these stories are just like tools of building trust. Sometimes they're not going to do all these things they're telling you, but they're trying to find out if there are going to be law enforcement raid in that neighborhood or not. So they will do certain type of things to know if you could be trusted with information or, before. So it's not just, because we're all Africans. No. Sometimes they will build that. Or maybe they will drive around going to supermarket, you join them, and they said, oh, some of my little boys are coming to collect their benefits from our business, and they will give them 50,000 pounds in your presence just to see your reaction and if you're going to report them because you've seen them or something like that. So my engagement with them, I'm not a law enforcement officer, is to understand. Not that I support what they do, but for me, understanding them, that is the key. Not to condemn or ridicule them, but to understand. So if we talk about policy and this and that, how do we prescribe something without understanding the people who are actually in the game? So that is my main motivation. So they will test you in some ways with information and try to understand your standpoint, and they know actually that you are enrolled as a university student here and this is what you're doing before they can trust you with information. Either directly or they will introduce you with other chapters, maybe in Spain, in Barcelona, or other chapters in Ireland, something like that. But that trust, that is key. Sometimes some journalists, they will say, oh, Suleman, I want to talk to Sakawa boys. I want to talk to Yahoo boys. I want to, could you please? It's not that easy. You need to build the trust. So let us take it for example. If I introduce you to someone in maybe Chicago who is a fraudster and I want to interview, so after the interview, 2 weeks later, the person is arrested, then I will be in danger, either directly or my families or people that I know, and the contact will also be sabotaged globally. So this is how we operate.
Something we talk about a lot is how cybercrime research, right, is seen as very different from traditional criminological research, but the work that you're doing reminds me a lot of kind of the older ethnographies, right, of people talking to like active offenders in different areas. So that seems really similar. And another conversation, right, is are online offenders, cyber offenders, a distinct population? So were the across the research that you've done, are the folks who are working in these fraud groups, were they engaged in offline crime before? Is this their first foray into offending typically, or is it kind of a migration more so?
Yes and no. Let me explain. Those who engage in online crimes, it is simplistic or inaccurate to say that that is a migration from traditional crime to online crime, but that is an option for them, a better option for them. A better option, I will also explain. If you talk about stigmatization, in West Africa, not that they support online crime, but a thief, if like in a marketplace, a thief is so unfortunate to be caught that we kind of exercise instant punishment, either execution or they burn the person alive or they beat the person to death, just a market thief, or something like, But whereas online fraudsters, they are seen in a more positive light, that these are the boys who are struggling and they use computer. And for older generation, people using computer to do something, that means they're intelligent. And some of them, they have university degrees. And also, what kind of fed into that narrative is the issue of political corruption. Political corruption. So they will compare these online fraudsters with politicians who are deeply corrupt and said these boys are trying to adapt to the system. They have gone to school, no jobs, or even when they have legitimate occupation, they cannot support their dependents, senior citizens, girlfriends, and wives. So they kind of tap into that ambiguity between the authority and the street level criminals to support them. So those people who engage in this type of crime, online crime is a better option for them than maybe armed robbery or all this kind of, it's a better option from the point of view of the society and for also the negative consequences. And many young marriageable women will be happy and proud to say, I'm dating a Yahoo boy or I'm dating a Sakawa boy, rather than I'm dating an armed robber or a bandit. So this is just to,
For the listeners who maybe aren't aware, can you explain what the difference is or the meaning behind a Yahoo boy versus a Sakawa boy and how that factors into the perceptions and the practices of African fraudsters in general?
Yeah, the term Yahoo boy kind of originated in the early 2000s when the Game Boys, that is the fraudsters, they generally use the Yahoo app messenger to communicate with their victims. So based on that, they call themselves the Yahoo boys. And the fraud, they call a Yahoo Yahoo. I'm just doing Yahoo Yahoo, I'm just using Yahoo app to send messages to people abroad and get some, some money back home, something like that. So the term originated from that. And we also have the one they call Yahoo Plus. Yahoo Plus is the blending of the computer aspect of the game with the spiritual strategies. So when they blend, some of the Yahoo boys that blend the technological, although the spiritual one is also technological, the computer-oriented tactics with the spiritual-oriented tactics together, they call them the Yahoo Plus. So it's plus. The term, the Sakawa, it means, is from Ghana, means people that blend the spiritual aspect of tactics to the game. So they call them the Sakawa boys, because sometimes maybe they will make some spiritual rituals and incantations and, to bless their own business, in some ways. We're not going to go into details because we only have 1 hour. So it's comprehensive, So they call them the Sakawa boys. And yeah, that is just the origin. They have some names, but the spiritual aspect is also another dimension where some Western perspective, they are ignorant and blind, because sometimes you conduct ethnographic research and you said, okay, the Sakawa boys, they said this about the spiritual this and the spiritual that. And in the process of academic peer review and we said, oh, we don't understand this. Oh, what we're saying, there is no laboratory for me as a researcher to tell you the efficacy of that type of spiritual magic. I don't have the lab to tell you is 50%, is 90%, is 20%. All I'm saying is that if those who practice the juju magic or the voodoo or use the spiritual tactics, if they believe that the situation are real, they are real in their consequences.
Yeah, it's so real to the person. Yeah.
Yes. If, for example, somebody who is a wife says that, oh, it's only when I use this type of ingredients to cook for my husband that makes him happy, that is, how am I going to judge whether that is,
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, that's the way it is here.
So you've done a ton of work in a lot of different areas. The spirituality part, I think, is fascinating. You've done this very important study on hustle kingdoms as well. I don't know if there's one particular issue you want to hit on, or, I mean, I know it's all kind of interrelated. Can you talk for just a second about the concept of a hustle kingdom and how that fits into what you've been talking about so far?
Yeah, the hustle kingdom is, there's nothing historically new about hustle kingdom. Back in the day, in the 80s or 70s and 90s and, that era, if you, like a city like Lagos or big, mega cities, you have business centers. They call it business centers, where ordinary citizens, they can come there and photocopy their document or send fax to their relatives. But underneath that layer is a scamming business. So the owner of the business center have some boys working for him, training them in that type of business, and then they will have a secretary, a woman typically, because then no AI to to blend things. So they will send pen and paper letters abroad, send fax, and waiting for potential victims to reply. And they will be training about 2 or 3 or 6 or 7 boys. When they graduate now, they will start paying back to, or whenever they cash out, they will pay to the owner, So Hustle Kingdom also operates within that engine. Hustle Kingdom is the illicit cybercrime academy, where people can enroll free of charge in the beginning to learn about online fraud. They have different chapters, maybe romance fraud, hookup scam, business email compromise. So they learn under the leadership of a chairman or a master or the owner. And when they graduate or when they start receiving money from victims, they will be paying some percentage to the owner. So the owner will house them, feed them, take care of them financially, and do all the logistics. In that sense, it is gratis. But as soon as they become more experienced and earn money from their victims, they will be paying back to their master. So that is Hustle Kingdom, is an illicit academy or school. And what makes it very attractive is this issue of the society or the political corruption or the infrastructure that kind of boost that. Because most people that will go to universities, colleges, they study biology, chemistry, physics, this and that. Upon graduation, no job. And before graduation, perhaps their parents sold their family land, their house here, their properties, just to push them across. Because in Ghana and Nigeria, particularly, nursery education, primary, secondary, university, that is upon the shoulder of the parents and community. There is no kind of grant coming from the government to support this. So some parents, even according to the research I concluded with my colleagues, some parents will go to successful or active Yahoo boys and tell them, "Oh, please, John, help me. My son, Joseph, he's 30 years old. He's just at home after graduating from the university of this or that. There is no job. Could you please help him and teach him this type of business that you're doing?" So the parents of James will go to the parents of John, who is a Yahoo boy, to negotiate. Then they will introduce them. So, and also some parents, there's one concept they call the Association of Yahoo Boys, Association of Yahoo Boys Parents, because they have association on Facebook and some other, where they club together to support their boys or their sons in that business. They support them through maybe it's 4 dimensions: legal advice. If there is a good lawyer in that neighborhood, they will introduce. So my boy was into this type of trouble with the authority. If you go to this lawyer, spiritually, they will go to churches or traditional shrines and this. Once you have this type of problem, go to this pastor. This pastor will pray for you, And also economically, they will have chains of supermarkets where they invest their money. And they will buy maybe some shops, association of all the owners of the shops in that area, they are mothers of Yahoo boys, where they invest their money. So if you put all these things together, you see that it's a well-oiled machine. And what makes it a very good option from the perspective of those involved is because of the socio-cultural situation, the economic situation, the political situation. Whereas you will see that the head of, from local government councillor to the president, they will embezzle money and invest it, put it in Geneva and this and that for their children and children, and nothing happened. So many people, they have this idea that you have to also carve out something for yourself in the light of the situation in which they find themselves. So this is the dominant perspective among those people who are either directly involved as Yahoo boys or Sakawa boys, or their parents or their cousins or any person benefiting from the business.
Yeah, I really didn't, prior to this conversation, realize how many cultural tenets were a part of this. Like, it really is kind of like a, as you said, right, spiritual, cultural, economic outgrowth of circumstances, it seems like, which I think is remarkable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No. It's a kind of all interwoven. You cannot talk about one and separate and remove others, Sometimes some offenders, they just as Tom will write a paper and cite maybe a general theory of crime. Some offenders, if you interview them, they will also cite some colonial, some colonial references, because they took gold from our land, this and that. They will make all those incantations to support. They're not saying that is all these colonial or cultural reasons that these are the motivation, but rationalization, how they are able to rationalize, make sense of what they are doing. That we say, I took money from maybe a Canadian person or a British person, or, if you go to British Museum, you see my grandfather's properties there, I'm just trying to take a little bit reimbursement.
And it's such a different mode of offending to a certain degree from what we think of with Western offenders as well. I know, like Luke Feld's research around, sort of Dutch-based hacker groups and things like that. It seems like it's very short-term. The connections are there mostly to facilitate the offense, and if they can get along, great, and then they'll have their money mules and things like that, cashing out, moving on, and networks persist as necessary. Whereas it sounds like in this case, it's very much community driven and networks persist because of social, relational, and other cultural factors. And it's not just a short-term connection, it's a long-term binding community-based sort of offender network. Is that a fair way to characterize it?
Yeah, what I will say, not driven per se, but some of the enabling factors are in the infrastructure, in the society, kind of is soften the blow of accountability, and it also empower the stability of the industry, the illicit economy, because sometimes if you see someone, maybe a bank robber or this or that, or a rapist, or some people will just call the 911 and say, oh, I saw somebody, this, that, this, But in this type of communities, you see Yahoo Boys activity, some people are reluctant to do anything about it because of the way they rationalize those actions in relation to that of the authority. I mean, the government, or what is going, Maybe some people will stay 3 days, no food, no electricity, and no that, and they cannot afford to send their, children to nursery school, no good road. And suddenly, one of the boys in their community start distributing bag of rice to every, start helping out, paying school fees. Some of them, they support football club, they have scholarship for some people, and they donate money for this and that. Some of them, they are also have music labels where street boys without no connection can come to their studio and showcase their talent and see how far they, So that kind of atmosphere makes it more palatable for, from that perspective.
Mm-hmm. In that way, it seems like it's very pro-social, like they're encouraging community and social ties.
Yeah, there are a lot of, when we say that all these offenders, the problem is that from Western perspective, especially the media, they will say the African men, Ghanaian men, Nigerian men. No, these are a small percentage of the population doing this, because they also have good men and women. Despite poverty, deprivation, they wouldn't go into that part of, of life just because of what, in my own opinion, because of their family upbringing. Some people, they will not do this or do that because it will break the heart of their mother or their father, or it goes against their understanding of their own religiosity or spiritual anchor. Some people, they will say that the first time I came to the US, after 1 week, somebody contacted me if I'm going to participate as a picker. They will use the person's account, just to, money, meal, and laundry. And the person said, no, I don't want to do this because it will break the heart of my mother. I just came to the US to study and go back home, something like that. So some people are like that, but on the other hand, it depends on how they rationalize their options in life before they,
Now, you mentioned music. I know you've done a little bit of work looking at the relationship between fraud and hip hop and music in general. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I collaborated with other individuals, some music journalists, law enforcement officers, and some some academics in cultural studies. We looked at hip hop music or Afrobeats from 2017 to 2023, looking for online fraud teams and how they rationalize online fraud and victims. We're looking at the lyrics, Then the core findings from that study and the one I did before that, some of the lyrics, they dehumanize victims, but not in obvious ways. They will use some terminologies like MAGA, Mugu, Maye, all these terms to categorize victims. Just to be very simple, all these terms mean something like foolish animal or senseless animal, or, kind of the victims of online fraud. And then we portray the Game Boys or the fraudsters as hunters, they are great men, They go to the wood, they bring back the animal back to feed their family because of situations, because of economic situation, political situation, colonial situations. So they portray the fraudsters more or less as heroes and the victims as animals. But not in obvious ways. Sometimes even prominent people or people with authority, they will go to parties and play this music without knowing the actual implications, Mm-hmm. So we're looking at, so we look at all this type of narrative in music. And we also find that this type of praising people who acquired wealth through illegal ways is nothing new historically. Historically, juju music and other, categories, they will praise drug dealers, corrupt politicians, and all these people, and they also mention their names. Just like Afrobeat now mention and praise people like Hush Puppy. You know Hush Puppy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's in your neighborhood. He's in prison in the US now. Yeah, they will praise and mention some high-profile fraudsters. So also, before then, Nigerian music or Ghanaian music, they will praise also corrupt politicians or drug dealers, and they are doing it as a strategic business move. They are doing it because they are kind of telling the stories about what is going on in their community. One. Another one is a business move, because if you mention the name of all these people, whenever they have parties for their girlfriends, marriage, burial, whatever they're doing, they will invite these artists to perform. That guarantees that, it's a source of income. And sometimes, maybe some fraudsters in Malaysia will have invite upcoming artists, come to Malaysia, come to Dubai, come to US to perform. I will sponsor just because their names are mentioned or, something like that. So it's also strategic. And sometimes too, they are telling the stories of their life, because some of the artists or their allies in the music industry, one way or the other, benefited or participated in online fraud. So in the collaborative research, we gave instances about many singers arrested in USA for this type of fraud, in Canada for this type of fraud, for this type of fraud. So some of them, not all, some of them, they are ex-fraudsters. And some of them, they also club together with fraudsters before they made it very, before they made it to the highest level. And one interesting thing too, in the beginning, in the opening stage of their career, they will say it openly. I support these fraudsters. I support Hush Puppy. I do. They will say it very direct. But as they progress, because they want to kind of align with the other narrative in society and that, they will drop it or say it in not, indirect ways. So I've seen some artists in the beginning, they will just take the mic. Oh, Yahoo, Yahoo, Yahoo. Yahoo is this, Yahoo is that. Then 3 or 4 years later, they will say it in a way, not direct, but, so that is also very, very interesting. But you cannot separate that with the music industry. Nope. Even the research I did with a law enforcement officer in 2019, we interviewed 40 law enforcement officers, and they also supported this narrative that sometimes they will arrest some people and they will say, what are you doing for a living? So I have a music industry, I have a music label. But when they investigate, they will find out that the music label or just something to cover up. Sometimes they do not have enough evidence to bring them to justice, but they know through the investigation that is a fact, that you cannot separate music industry from, but not everyone. It is too simplistic to say that all artists or a majority of the artists are doing that. But sociologically, if you ask me, some people who do not support or endorse Yahoo Boys activities in their song, that is good. But if you look back historically, you will find out that their governor was one of the corrupt governors in Nigeria, so they have that platform to be free, to choose what they want,
So just given how complex the dynamic is in terms of religion, political corruption, community needs, financial situations, how can we even begin to deal with the problem of cybercrime in Nigeria or Ghana or other parts of Africa?
Yeah, it is a complex situation, and I would try to metaphorically say that instead of looking at the fallen leaves or apples on the ground, we have to look at the rotten or decayed tree before we deal with the fallen. Maybe you wake up in the morning, you have one apple tree, you see all the leaves falling on the ground, all the apples, and you try to, investigate the apples and the leaves. You have to look at the tree. The tree, what I'm referring to or trying to say here is the government, the people in power, and their relationship with the international communities. You will find out in some of academic writing and some of journalistic finding that there are many politicians who have stolen and looted their communities, and some certain nations in the West, they are the custodians of all these stolen goods, you understand? Whereas there are some online criminals or fraudsters here and there. They arrest and do this and dramatize and publish. We arrest 10 Nigerians in Canada. We arrest 10 in USA. You know, so why not we do the same with the tree rather than talking about the leaves or the apples, the fallen apples? So that, for me, would be a very good beginning to deal with the issues.
Yeah.
That is my own professional opinion. I'm not trying to say that the fraudsters, they are right. I'm not trying to justify what they're doing, but we have to look at the underlying, current that is supporting this type of activities. Because if, for example, the Nigerian or Ghanaian general population, if they say 100% no to online fraud, that will stop. But because they don't have that motivation, because if they look up and they look down, they do not see any type of difference. The line dividing up and down there's no difference. So how do we judge those people who are down? And so it makes sometimes many people, they will receive legitimate scholarship from Ghanaian government, and they will write it, Mr. John Joseph received maybe $1,000 to study in maybe in Malaysia or study here. That is just, the person will end up in Malaysia without $1 single, and the person will graduate from that institution without no single dollar coming from Ghanaian government. So out of desperation, some people will innovate. They've already sold their family land or their father's car or this or that or borrowed. They find themselves in Malaysia or this, but no, the source of income promised by the authority, nowhere. That is in another person's pocket. And they will write it in a newspaper, this person received scholarship, and this is just one example. I'm not trying to justify, but we have to see the undercurrent, what is actually going on before,
Well, it seems like trying to sanction and punish individual offenders is an individual response to a systemic problem, is essentially what you're getting at.
Yes, the problem is systemic, and it's from my point of view, it is the structure that innovates that. So we cannot see the offenders as a sociologist. We cannot see them as alien in the body of society, as some theory said, but as a caricature or a reflection of the decay. It's a reflection of what is going on. It's a symptom of what is going on, and not as alien in the body of society. You cannot say, Yahoo boys, they are bad. This, no, is a reflection of that society, of that community. It's a reflection. If you live in a neighborhood or if you live in a village, very early in the morning, you see primary school age children walking around begging for bread and snacks in the morning. You have to do the maths to know that there is something wrong, either with the family or the community, because they're supposed to be in school, they're supposed to be taken care of.
So much of what you said is fascinating and difficult to deal with in terms of, like you mentioned, if we have to deal with structural factors, that's a hard problem to solve. And so it winds up being easier to deal with some of these individual issues rather than the systemic factors that are involved. What, from an international context, could help to deal with the problems in Nigeria or Ghana or other parts of Africa to help? Like, is this an international community kind of response where would aid or support? What would help, do you think, long run? I realize that's a huge question, so I don't expect an answer.
For me, based on my professional experience in the field, I would say that the best way would be to first of all look at the relationship between these international communities and Ghana and Nigeria. Look at the relationship. And also, do not use Western prescribed policy and that, because sometimes I hear people say maybe we need to educate them, we need to change their moral compass and educate. Those people are educated. They do not need they do not need additional Western education. Some of them they graduated from Canada and this, they do not need that type of education. You have to provide something alternative to what they have, or even better for them to stop. And if you talk about, sometimes people also make this mistake and frame it as a cybercrime problem in Ghana or in Nigeria. Is that actually a problem for the communities or for the people involved and the people who are benefiting from, is that actually a problem within that community? Or is your own problem because of the victims, or for the international kind of sanitization of, we are doing this or we are doing that? You have to look at the problem and give them something alternative to what they're doing after graduation or this or that, or work with the government. Create a system like a scholarship. If you are the best student from University of Ghana, you will get this. Once you graduate from this, there will be something for you. People will think twice before they join that. People will think, but if you do not have an alternative, and before you even get a legitimate employment, you have to bribe or know somebody who knows someone, or be a cousin of this or that, or walk through the system. And sometimes people will be employed as this or that, and the supervisor will be collecting 10% of their salary for 3 years, because that have been promised before they got the offer, you understand, something like that. Mm-hmm. So you have to deal with the system. And from the international point of view, you have to check the relationship with that government. How are you actually supporting them? In what way? And what you are doing, is that being informed by research? I know policy is politically determined. Sometimes your research will say that, and they already have their narrative. They already have their narrative, what to say. So your research is not there. And sometimes they will just massage the research, put A and B here, and just take one and say this just to support what they want to do. You understand? If the international community are actually trying to do something for ordinary Ghanaians or Nigerians, that is another point. Or they want to maintain a good relationship with the corrupt politicians, just to, that is another thing. So if we talk about the problem of Sakawa boys or Yahoo boys, that is not impossible, but are we willing to do the do? Or we're just trying to, to dance around, Even the issue of AI, some people say is a problem, but if the drum beat changes, then the dancer have, adapt to the drum beat, and that is the way, so that is not actually a problem, but are we actually willing to do what we have to do to make a, to make a change? If you are in a kind of, you have in a community and there is a problem between maybe the landowners and maybe the truck owners, and you've already taken bribe or supporting the landowners at the expense of the other one, how are you going to make peace between them? So are we ready to do what we're supposed to do? That is the question. Mm-hmm. Or that is the question. Our support human centric aspect of cybercrime research, mm-hmm. and actually get the raw data and iron the policy according to to research, or we're just trying to do what we're push around. And so for me, I'm not very optimistic. That is I'm not very this is my professional opinion, I am not very optimistic because you have to give them an alternative. The community. Sometimes they say rehabilitation of Yahoo Boys, rehabilitation of this, and they will send funding to some agencies who promise to do rehabilitation. This is another level of scam as well. Who are they scamming? Who are they rehabilitating?
Mhm.
We have to have actual data to support. This issue is complex. So it's just the scammers, they are successful because of multitude layers of scams that support them.
Mhm.
Yes. I don't
I
want
feel
to
like-
name names here, but
Yeah. I feel like we could talk for a very long time. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface of kind of the areas of work that you study. And we've talked a lot about policy, which is good. I guess one of the few questions that we always try to end on is what should the average person or what should law enforcement, what should someone take away from what we've talked about so far? What would you want the average person to know by the end of this discussion? And remember, just one little thing.
In my professional opinion, I think we have to do more to support the victims based on actual research, fact and figures to support the victims, not just based on victim experience only, because there are two layers, offenders and victims. You cannot talk about victims or support them without talking about offenders. There are two sides of the coin. If I say tell the victims the truth, that would be like too simplistic, but to use the actual information to inform what you are, do not just categorize, oh, these are the bad ones, these are the good ones, these are this and these are that, because you will not understand the abyss of the vulnerabilities of the victims if you cut corners. If you cut corners, you will not understand. So you have to use diverse sources of information for you to craft that, because the victims are suffering. The victims are suffering, and sometimes those people who claim to support them too, they do not have that rounded information.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying they are not doing their best, but the problem is like the body of the elephant. Sometimes they look at the head and we are looking at the tail or the leg. So we need to kind of have 360 degree of the problem before we can support them, because the victims are suffering. Let me give you an example. The issue of the spiritual dimension of romance scam. Sometimes the victims, they will give their underwear, they will send it through DHL, UPS to Ghana or to Nigeria or elsewhere. This is like a petty thing to do, because they will think it's just emotional something. I'm sending my bra or underwear to my boyfriend in Ghana because of intimacy or loneliness or all those kind of. But it is deeper than that. That is another dimension, because the person has already voluntarily given that personal item to the victim, to the offender. The offender can go to the shrine and use that item to work on the item with the spiritualist, and that put the victim in a much more dangerous situation than anticipated, because the person voluntarily given. Spiritually, it has been voluntarily given, and there's a kind of spiritual marriage or something like that can be arranged. This is my wife, this is my husband, based on that understanding. What the husband asks, the wife gives. But some people who are supporting the victims will say these type of things. I send this to my boyfriend in Ghana. They will ignore it because they do not understand the implication. It's not only money. So what I'm saying, the problem is like elephant. Let us walk around and work together. Do not trivialize one type of data, or there's no type of data that is more significant than the other or less. We have to, So with that, we can support the victims in a much more, productive way. That is my, because the victims, although I study offenders much more, but the victims are suffering. And it breaks my heart, really, because there are some information or some ways of supporting them, or even bringing that type of awareness, or even noting a red flag like that. But yeah, that for me is, yeah.
Well, it was great to talk to you. I would love to have you back on. I feel like there's a ton of other things that we can talk about.
Yeah.
But thank you for being with us. We appreciate all your time today. It's really good to talk to you about this.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to having you with us the next time we cross the firewall.
Thanks for listening to the Crossing the Firewall podcast. This is a production of the Center for Cybercrime Investigation and Training in the School of Criminal Justice at Michigan State University, produced by J.J. Thomas. The thoughts and opinions expressed are those of the hosts and the guests and do not necessarily reflect those of the university. If you have a comment or a question about the show, please email us at crossingthefirewall@gmail.com. Also, make sure that you follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn for more information. And if you're enjoying us on your favorite podcast app, please make sure that you like the show and leave us a review so that way everybody knows what we're up to. And if you're listening in on YouTube, make sure that you like us and subscribe so that way you're staying up to date on everything that is crossing the firewall.